Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Our today material is informal fallacies and the presenter is me, Erina Nadia Faroh, Lulu Fathiatul Maghriza, and Selvia Dewi Sagita. Okay, without any further ado, let's go to the video. Fallacies in general. A fallacy is defect in an argument that consists in something other than merely false premises. As we will see, fallacies can be committed in many ways, but usually they involve either a mistake in reasoning or the creation of some illusion that make a bad argument appear good, or both. Fallacies are usually divided into two groups, formal and informal. A formal fallacy is one that may be identified through more inspection of the form or structure of an argument. Fallacies of this kind are found only in deductive arguments that have identified form. Informal fallacies are those can be detected only through analysis of the content of the argument. Remember that formal fallacies occur only in deductive argument. Fallacies of relevance. The fallacies of relevance share the common characteristic that the argument in which they occur have premises that are logically irrelevant to the conclusion, yet the premises are relevant psychologically. So the conclusion may seem to follow from the premises, even though it does not follow logically. In a good argument, the premises provide genuine evidence in support of conclusion. In an argument that commits a fallacy of relevance, on the other hand, the connection between premises and conclusion is emotional. To identify a fallacy of relevance, therefore, one must be able to distinguish genuine evidence from various forms of emotional appeal. 1. Appeal to force. The fallacy of appeal to force occurs whenever an arguer poses a conclusion to another person and tells the person either implicitly or explicitly that some harm will come to him or her if he or she does not accept the conclusion. 2. Appeal to pity. The appeal to pity fallacy occurs when an arguer attempts to support a conclusion by merely evoking pity from the reader or listener. This pity may be directed toward the arguer or toward some third party.
3. Appeal to the people. Two processes are involved, one of them direct, the other indirect. The direct approach occurs when an arguer addressing a large group of people excites the emotion and enthusiasm of the group to win acceptance for his or her conclusion. The objective is to arouse a kind of momentality. In the indirect approach, the arguer aims his or her appeal not at the crowd as a whole but at one or more individuals separately, focusing on some aspect of their relationship to the crowd. The indirect approach includes such specific forms as the bandwagon argument, the appeal to vanity, and the appeal to snobbery. All are standard techniques of the advertising industry.
4. Argument against the person. This fallacy always involves two arguers. One of them advances, either directly or implicitly, a certain argument, and the other then responds by directing his or her attention not to the first person's argument but to the first person himself. When this occurs, the second person is said to commit an argument against the person. 5. Accident. The fallacy of accident is committed when a general rule is applied to a specific case it was not intended to cover. Typically, the general rule is cited either directly or implicitly in the premises and the wrongly applied to the specific case mentioned in the conclusion. 6. Strawman. The strawman fallacy is committed when an arguer distorts an opponent's argument for the purpose of more easily attacking it, demolishes the distorted argument, and then concludes that the opponent's real argument has been demolished. By so doing, the arguer is said to have set up a straw man and knocking it down, only to conclude that the real man has been knocked down as well. 7. Missing the point. This fallacy occurs when the premises of an argument support one particular conclusion, but then a different conclusion, often vaguely related to the correct conclusion, is drawn. Whenever one suspects that such a fallacy is being committed, he or she should be able to identify the correct conclusion, the conclusion that the premises logically imply. This conclusion must be significantly different from the conclusion that is actually drawn. 8. Red herring. This fallacy is closely associated with missing the point. The red herring fallacy is committed when the arguer diverts the attention of the reader or listener by changing the subject to a different but sometimes subtly related one. He or she then finishes the either drawing a conclusion about this different issue or by merely presuming that some conclusion has been established.
3. Valencies of weak induction. In each of the following fallacies, the premises provide at least a set of evidence in support of the conclusion, but the evidence is not nearly good enough to cause a reasonable person to believe the conclusion. 9. Appeal to unqualified authority. Argumentum and verecundium. The appeal to unqualified authority fallacy is a variety of the argument from authority and occurs when the cited authority or witness is not trustworthy. 10. Appeal to ignorance argument and ignoradium. When the premises of an argument state that nothing has been proved one way or the other about something, and the conclusion that make a definite assumption about that thing, the argument commences appeal to ignorance. 11. Hazy generations. Converse accidents. Hazy generation is a fallacy that affects inductive generations. In Chapter 1, we saw that an induction generation is an argument that draws a conclusion about all members of a group from evidence that pertain to a selected sample. 12. False cause. The fallacy of false cause occurs whenever the link between premises and conclusion depends on some imagined causal connection that probably does not exist. 13. Slippery slope. The fallacy of slippery slope is a fallacy of the false cause fallacy. It occurs when the conclusion of an argument rests upon an alleged generation and there is not sufficient reason to think that the generation will actually take place. 14. Weak analogy. This fallacy affects inductive argument from analogy. An argument from analogy is an argument in which the conclusion depends on the existence of an analogy or similarity between two things or situations. 4. Fallacies of presumption, ambiguity, and grammatical analogy. The fallacies of presumption include beginning the question complex question, false dichotomy, and surprises evidence. These fallacies arise not because the premises are irrelevant to the conclusion or provide insufficient reason for believing the conclusion, but because the premises presume what they purport to prove. 15. Beginning the question, petitio principii. The fallacy of beginning the question is committed whenever the arguer crisis the illusion that inadequate premises provide adequate support for the conclusion by leaving out a key premises, by restating the conclusion as a premises, or by reasoning in a circle. 16. Complex question. The fallacy of complex question is committed when a single question that is really two or more questions is asked and a single answer is applied to both questions. Every complex question presumes the existence of a certain conditional. 17. False dichotomy. The fallacy of false dichotomy, otherwise called false bifurcation, and the other error fallacy, is committed when one premise of an agreement is either blah 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 or blah 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 disjunctive statement that present two alternatives as if they were jointly exhaustive as if no third alternative were possible. 18. Suppress evidence. Cogent argument is an inductive argument with good reasoning and true premises. The requirement of true premises includes the proviso that the premises not ignore some important bit of evidence that outweighs the present evidence and entail a very different conclusions. 19. Equivocation. The valency of equivocation occurs when the conclusion of an agreement depends on the fact that a word or phrases in a usage, either explicitly or implicitly, in two different senses in the argument. 20. Ambiguity. The valency of ambiguity occurs when the arguer misinterprets a statement that is syntactically ambiguously and proceeds to draw a conclusion based on the faulty interpretation. 21. Composition. The valency of composition is committed when the conclusion of an argument depends on the erroneous transference of an attribute from the part of something onto the whole. 22. Division. The valency of division is the exact reverse of composition. As composition goes from parts to whole, division goes from whole to parts.
Fallacies in ordinary language. This section addresses two topics. The first concerns the challenge of detecting the fallacies of others in ordinary language, and the second relates to the goals of avoiding fallacies in one's own argument. For the first, detecting fallacies. Most of the informal fallacies that we have seen thus far have been clear-cut, easily recognizable instances of a specific mistake. The reason is that there are innumerable ways of making mistakes in arguing, and variation inevitable occur that may not be exact instances of any specifically named fallacy. In addition, one fallacy's mode of arguing may be mixed together with one or more others, and the strain of reasoning may have to be disentangled before the fallacies can be named. The second is avoiding fallacies. Why do people commit informal fallacies? We can identify three factors that lead to most of the informal mistakes in reasoning. The first is intent. The second factor that leads to the commission of informal fallacies is a careless mental posture combined with an emotional disposition favoring or opposing some person or thing. The third factor that leads to the commission of informal fallacies is far more difficult to contend with than the first two. It consists in the influence of what we may call the worldview of the arguer.
For more detail, you can read the PowerPoint that we have shared. I think that's enough for today. Thank you for watching our video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.